Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick and I'm joined as ever by our Blues reporter, Alex Dicken, with whom I spent far too much of Saturday on the long, sometimes quite slow A14 to and from Ipswich. Hi Alex, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Brian. It wasn't too bad once you got around that puddle. It was all right, wasn't it?
I think Puddle's probably doing it a slight injustice. It was more of a C, I thought, but yeah, it was big enough to take up 2 lanes of the A14, wasn't it, and delay us for 20 minutes. But we got there in the end, and we probably got what we expected to as well overall. So obviously we're going to reflect on Ipswich, a 3-1 defeat for Birmingham City. They didn't really feature in the first half, but somehow they managed to produce a great equaliser. Had their moments in the second half without ever really working the goalkeeper, and then 1-1 with 10 minutes to go, and unfortunately it got away from them. Alex, what are your main takes or your thoughts from that visit to Portman Road?
I think it was a deserved defeat first and foremost. Blues were outplayed in the first half. How they managed to go in a half-time level, I think was beyond most of us, because Ipswich completely dominated in every single aspect for probably 42 minutes of the first half. Really nice goal, to be fair. Blues scored on the stroke of half-time. Miyoshi, great play down the right, a lovely pullback for Jordan James. Very good finish from about 12 yards, 8th of the season in the league. That's only adding to his price tag. But again, at the start of the second half, I thought Blues did quite well and managed to wrestle back some control they lacked in the first half. And they had a couple of openings, mainly through Stansfield. One where the ball's coming over his shoulder for a volley that he just didn't quite connect with. And another where he's forced the goalkeeper into a save, but I thought it was a strange save, to be honest. The goalkeeper's kind of got across and managed to palm it in the other direction. It's a decent effort, though, and that's probably as good as it got. They didn't really create anything that clear-cut. And then, obviously, there was the moment in the 81st minute where Siriki Dembele has lost Axel Tuanzebe, and he's gotten behind and pulled the ball back for Sarmiento to score. And from there, I didn't see Blues getting back into it.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk post-match, both on social media and in the press conference as well, about the substitutions that Mark Venus made. 63 minutes gone, and he makes a triple substitution with Bakuna, Dembele and Sunjic all coming on in place of Peck, Andre Dazelle and Tyler Roberts, and crucially the sort of the double pivot in the midfield axis went, didn't it? Is it fair to say though, Alex, that for 10 minutes those substitutions had a reasonably positive effect, or maybe even longer?
As soon as they got on the field, Dembele and Bakuna were dancing around inside Ipswich's penalty area, weren't they? And they threatened to create an opening. They didn't do enough for me. It was just tricks and no substance. But briefly, yeah. But when Ipswich kind of got to grips with them, I think we noticed the imbalance it had created in midfield more than anything else. Ivan Sunjic was almost left there on his own a lot of the time. I'm not sure who was supposed to be playing alongside him, or if indeed anyone was, but it looked a lot like Miyoshi was sometimes filling in that right central midfield berth, or sometimes Jordan James and Bakuna would drop a little deep, both as 8s. Yeah. But it was Sunjic was isolated, and they exposed him a couple of times, and Blues weren't made to pay. But eventually that goal came down. The Blues left, and it was probably, I think we should probably go straight into it. Dembele was probably partly to blame, wasn't he? Or if not, wholly to blame for the way they got in.
I'm struggling to pointing the finger at somebody else, if I'm honest. I think that was virtually the first time Tuanzebe had got forward all game, wasn't it? And
man of the match, though.
rather surprisingly. Interestingly, in the build-up, I know one of the people at work behind the scenes at Ipswich, and they were quite worried about Tuanzebe, and they said if there's a way into this Ipswich side, it's down that right back berth where Harry Clark was absent. But Blues didn't really test Tuanzebe, and not only did they not test him, they didn't follow him, and it's just the basics, isn't it? You've got to track a runner, and it brings us back to you've asked. I think it was you that asked Tony Mowbray about Dembele and why he's not starting. And was that just summed up in that one incident?
I think it does. It brings us back to the very first kind of interaction we had with Tony Mowbray about Dembele, where he, I think praised one of his games against Swansea in the first game, and his performance there was very good. But he also made the point that he'd had to kind of give him a stern warning in training the previous week because Dembele hadn't been running when he didn't have the ball. And he asked him why, and Dembele said, because I was trying to conserve energy for when I do have the ball. And obviously Tony Mowbray wasn't having that. It's probably a habit in Dembele more than anything, because if you think about the way Blues would have played under John Hughes at the start of the season, where a lot of it was engineered to get the best out of Dembele on that left-hand side, he was effectively allowed a lot of the time to not really take his defensive responsibilities on. It was more kind of Lee Buchanan handling that left back area by himself. And obviously Tony Mowbray is not having that, and that's not the way Blues are playing at the moment. So he's got to get to grips with that, or he won't play. Simple as that. And that's what we've seen in the last three games. He hasn't started. And looking at the Southampton game coming up this weekend, that's a game where a lot of the ball is going to be on the floor. Blues are going to have to be clinical and creative when they have possession, because they're not going to have a lot of it against a Russell Martin team that just effectively wants the ball all the time. Someone like Dembele would be useful, but can you start him after he's came on against Ipswich and been at fault for their goal? Probably not.
Well, what I would say to that is that Southampton are going to have a lot of the ball, maybe as much as 70%, and Blues press will be absolutely key, because they will try and play out from deep, and if Dembele's on that wing and he's not doing his part of the press, then Southampton are going to be out and Blues are going to be in trouble, aren't they? So yes, you want his quality and the rare occasions that Blues do have the ball, but if most of that game is without the ball, then I think it's a very, very fair question to ask. I don't know. I just was he completely absolved of any defensive responsibility under Eustace? Because I did see on Twitter somebody say, somebody say that Dembele shouldn't be given defensive responsibility. He should be able to stay in the attacking third and just allowed to express himself.
There's a fine line there, isn't there? I do think Eustace created a system, particularly when Blues were out of possession, where Dembele's work going backwards would be minimal. I do think he left him. He allowed him that kind of freedom a lot more than any other players, because obviously he knew Dembele's quality. And under Eustace, Dembele was by far the most effective attacking player. Let's be honest, he was. The issue I have is he's clearly a very talented player, but is he talented enough compared to some of his teammates to say this is the guy who we're going to absolve from defensive responsibility and allow him to focus on being effective on the ball in the attacking third, and the rest of you have got to really muck in and put the graft in going backwards to make sure we're not shortchanged and don't concede goals that way. That's almost like a kind of a messy role, isn't it? You know what I mean? Where he's playing for Argentina and the other 10 guys know we've got to work our socks off and just get the ball to him so he can do his magic. Dembele's not in that league. We spoke actually as we were leaving the ground, didn't we, about, he's 27. With his ability, probably should be playing in the Premier League. There's obviously a reason that he's not there at this age, and that's probably because he doesn't do both sides that well.
Yeah, frustrating, isn't it? Because, you could put us there, you more effectively than me, and the one thing we could do would be to run and be defensively studious. It seems like a choice, doesn't it? Not to do it, and that's really frustrating because, as you say, the other side of the game has got in absolute bucket loads, and to decide or not to do it or to not try and get better at it, if he has, then I apologise. It certainly didn't look like that he was that engaged with that particular responsibility in that moment on Saturday. I just find it a little bit mystifying because he, as you said, he could have the footballing world at his feet in at least a small way.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was a game of subs, wasn't it, when you think about it? Because the Blues subs changed it negatively eventually, and the Ipswich subs were so positive because Amari Hutchinson, I know he came on in the 22nd minute, but he scored, the game-clinching goal. He was involved in the second goal as well. Jeremy Sarmiento scored the winning goal for them. So, it was frustrating. can you criticise Mark Venus for the subs? It's hard. I think it's hard to criticise him because he's obviously in a position that he's probably not normally in, that he doesn't make those decisions on a weekly basis. Tony Mowbray will make those calls, and obviously Mowbray, being at the stadium, would have the feel for it and know what he needs to do, whereas he can't make those calls, from a telephone, for example. That wouldn't be right, would it? I wouldn't think, because he needs to have kind of that understanding and flow of the game that you get from being inside the stadium.
What we do also, Alex, sorry, is what we don't get is we don't get the data that Mark Venus will be privy to. They're all GPS'd up, aren't they? These players, and they'll be, the coaching staff will be, and the analysts will be aware of who's fatigued. And certainly Mark Venus cited that, didn't he, in his post-match press conference, that players were tiring. So we don't have all the full picture that they have.
Yeah, and Tony Mowbray has pointed that out a few times when he's made subs previously. I think in the last 3 games we've seen Peck substituted, and around the 60-minute mark, haven't we? And in each of those 3 games, they've probably been sat there, why is he taking him off? He's playing really well, but it's obviously something to do with his data, having not played that many games before joining Blues in the previous, 2 or 3 months. So they need to look after these players because you can't have them break down. Blues have got a long way to go in this season. You don't want to be without a key player for those matches. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I suppose you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Moving on, and the day wasn't helped by results elsewhere, was it, Brian? I remember when I got into the press room afterwards, and you pointed out that most of the teams beneath Blues in the Championship table had actually won. I looked at it, and it's 6 of 8 teams below Blues had won at the weekend. Even Blackburn had got a point against Norwich to leapfrog Blues. So Blues are now in 18th, 6 points above the bottom 3 with a game in hand. I am going to actually include a nifty little graphic for those watching on YouTube right now, the league table. So yeah, it looks a little bleaker now, Brian, than it did, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. The gap to the bottom 3 has halved, hasn't it? In the space of a weekend, it's now down to 3 points. Blues do have a game in hand. That's only fair to point out. I often think that goal difference is quite an accurate sort of indicator of how good a team is. And if you look at Blues' goal difference there on -13, it's kind of ballpark for the other teams that are down there, isn't it? You've got Millwall on -14, QPR on -13, Stoke on -17. So I don't think we can really argue that it's a false position if that's an indicator. And yes, there are a billion circumstances as to why Blues are there, starting with what happened in early October, or you can maybe even go back to the transfer window and in the summer and say they signed too many injury playing players. There's not time for that inquest now. So there are lots of reasons there, but the table tells its story after 33 games, doesn't it? And other teams have played 34. Just wins and points are needed. I suppose the only one crumb of comfort I would draw from the weekend is if someone like Plymouth can go to Middlesbrough and win, or QPR pull off another surprise. There are shock results, and there's no reason to think that Blues won't produce some of their own shock results as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the game in hand is against Middlesbrough, isn't it? So hopefully that's one of the difficult games coming where Blues can take 3 points. We seem to be talking about this every single week on the podcast because the picture changes constantly. That's the crazy nature of the Championship. I think a few weeks ago you said Blues weren't in a relegation battle, and then the next week it was like Blues are in a relegation battle. Brian, what are you thinking now? For me, it's Blues are in a relegation battle until they aren't, and at the moment, because of the results and because of the 2 games coming up in quick succession, in particular against Southampton and Hull, which on paper you would expect Blues to lose against a team that's I think 4th in the league and the other that's 6th. Blues could be teetering right above the bottom 3, if not 22nd, by the time they face Millwall at the Den on March 9th. So I still think Blue squad is too good to go down. It's got too much quality in there. It shouldn't be in this position. But they're down there for a reason, like you say, and they've got to get out of it. My belief is still that Blues will stay up, but I think there's going to be a horrible turn to come where they could even end up being the 22nd place team, because I think that will change multiple times between now and May.
Yeah, well, there's still what 36, 39 points to play for, so it will absolutely change. I mean, when you asked me, are Blues in the relegation scrap a few weeks ago, I would have said no, and then that's changed, and now it's impossible to say that they're not, isn't it? Really, you know, one more weekend of negative results, and then and then there may be 1 point outside the relegation zone, or just in it, or 2 places above it, or something like that. It'd just be illogical to say that that they can't go down. I don't think they will go down, like you, but it'd just be defying all the evidence and all the numbers to say that they can't go down. The one thing that worries me, you look at the 11 and you say good keeper, great right back, right backs, in fact, absolute quality with Peck and Dazelle in the middle of the park. Stansfield's a good player. JJ's having a season of his life. There's so many reasons to be positive. I suppose the one thing that bothers me massively is the defensive lapses. That's something that probably hasn't changed, no matter who the manager's been. I think even Eustace's side were prone to defensive lapses, unless they went uber conservative, and made sure they kept hold of their nil side of the scoreline. I think that is the worry for me, is that clean sheets have always been hard to keep this season.
Seven clean sheets in 33 games. That's bad. That is bad when you look at it, because that's maybe they'll keep 10 if they're lucky now in the entire season. Last year it was, I think, 13 or 14. So yeah, 7. That's been a major problem. Blues have conceded 51 goals in those 33 games as well. Biggest problem for me has been there's not been a settled centre-back pairing since October, since it was Dion Sanderson and Kevin Long who started those first, 12, 13 games together. It's been chop and change. We've had Emmanuel Ivu come in. We've had Mark Roberts coming in and out of the team. Christian Bielik is now input at centre-back. In one game, I think Levy Cannon's played there. In another game, Cody Drummond is deputised there. So it has been really, really mix and match. There's been a lot of partnership. I think I was working it out last week or the week before, and I'm sure there was 9 or 10 pairings that have started games together this season. And I think since Mowbray has come in, I think there's been 5. Wow. So that's a lot. It's a lot, considering there's been 9 games in that time. There needs to be a settled pairing, and I think that question is going to come up later, actually, in the question and answer section. But for me at the moment, the pairing that kind of filled me with confidence over the last 3 or 4 weeks has been Christian Bielik and Mark Roberts, and obviously that was broken up with Bielik getting injured before the Ipswich game.
Yeah, absolutely, and more than those 9, 10, 11 combinations. There's been a back 3, there's been a back 5, there's been a back 4, hasn't there as well? It's the variables have been ever shifting, and I think most managers will tell you, you build from the back. The fact Mowbray didn't get a centre half in January kind of suggests that he sees the right options, and he sees some sort of partnerships that he can work with. Hopefully he will settle on one. And I did ask him that after one of the games in a post-match press conference, that is it your intention to eventually settle on a single central defensive partnership? And he kind of suggested it was, didn't he? But obviously Sanderson's injury put pay to that, and Bielik's not put pay to that, and Roberts has been in and out as well. So it does need sorting, and as you'll say, we'll come on to the right combination, or our perception of the right combination in a bit. But I would feel so much happier if I knew what back 4 was playing, and I just wonder. I'm going to throw this out there, and I know we haven't actually talked about it. Is it time just to get Lee Buchanan back onto his natural side, and maybe he's a bit more defensively solid potentially, and then you obviously lose something going forward. So and then you don't score the goals, and you start to be conservative again, don't you? And not sort of play out Mowbray's more attacking philosophy.
I'm not wholly uneasy with the fullback situation, to be honest. That doesn't massively concern me. I think whichever pairing of Ethan Laird, Cody Drummond, and Lee Buchanan play, you're going to be in fairly safe hands, I think. I don't think having Laird at left back takes away a great deal defensively, although a lot of the problems Ipswich caused against Blues were down that side. But I don't think that was on Laird, to be honest. Single-handedly, I think it was a combination, but it was also probably Dembele's fault when he came on. So
no, I even think in the first half actually when Wes Burns was on, he wasn't being tracked back, was he? I'm not sure.
No,
JJ did enough to help out Laird in that situation. If we've been massively honest, I suppose the key is don't get outnumbered down the flanks and don't lose duels in the middle. So yeah.
Just quickly before we move on, this got to be very quick because we don't want to spend too long on it, and I do love to let us make fools of ourselves. So there's the table again, Brian. Name your 3 relegated teams. I think one of them is probably a given, and then I'll name mine.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to go Rotherham and Sheffield Wednesday. I know you've been quite impressed by Sheffield Wednesday's Danny Roll, but I just think they are, one Barry Bannon tweaked calf away from being quite an ordinary side. So I'm going to go those 2. I've looked at the odds before you threw me under the bus here, and Blues, amazingly, you can get odds as long as 11-1 against relegation for Blues. You get 6s to 1 and 8s to 1. That's pretty much, or 7 to 1. That's pretty much where most bookmakers are pitching it for Blues. So they do see them. They really do see them as outsiders for relegation. So the third team that the bookmakers consider to be most likely are QPR and Stoke. I don't see QPR going down, if I'm honest. Stoke would trouble me. It just looks, after 24 signings in the summer, it doesn't feel like they've got their partnership settled. So I'll go Sheffield Wednesday, Rotherham, and at the risk of you broadcasting this to everybody in Staffordshire and notifying Pete Smith, our colleague, I'll say Stoke.
I'm with you on that, to be fair. I just think Stoke has been so poisonous for so long. I just think they're going to drop. And the teams also down there, QPR really picked up. Millwall, I don't see going down now. Neil Harris there, because they'll be absolutely horrible to play against for the remainder of this season. And the others as well, I just think it will be Stoke. I think they've made too many errors on the recruitment side over the last few years, particularly in the summer. I just think they're going to eventually pay the price for it. It's going to catch up with them, and I think that's going to be this season. I might be wrong; they might have gone on a good run, but that's just the way I feel at the moment. Sheffield Wednesday, honestly, I don't want to come across like I've got some sort of crush on Danny Roll, but they would be probably not even in the conversation if the season had started when Danny Roll took over, given what they've done. I think all of their 9 wins have come under him, and he took over in October, around the time when Blue started sinking. But yeah, on squad-wise, them and Rotherham are the worst teams in the league, but I think Stoke will join them. Moving on to the questions and takes. Takes first. I've had a fair few good ones this week, to be fair. Thanks for sending those over, and as ever, we appreciate it. I hope you'll keep doing it. Matt Hawkins lost control of the midfield after Peck and Dazelle were dragged, invited the pressure onto us in the last 15 minutes and paid the price. No complaints with the results, have to be better against Southampton. Brian, I think we both agree on the midfield point, don't we? We've mentioned that we're not sure on the variables surrounding those substitutions, whether there was injury or potentially fatigue at mind, which Martin Venus alluded to. But Blues do have a lot more control, especially in possession when Peck and Dazelle are on the field. I thought Peck was playing really well, to be honest, for probably the 30 minutes before he was substituted. End of the first half and first 15, 20 minutes of the second half. I thought he was really effective and was getting some quite harsh treatment from the Ipswich players. I particularly enjoyed it when Massimo Luongo fouled Peck and Koji Miyoshi ran over and shoved him to the ground. He seemed to be backing his teammates' corner there, but yeah, they were always going to be a miss, weren't they? Brian Peck and Dazelle, two good players.
Yeah, and as we said, they were, and as we said earlier, it wasn't an immediate effect because I do think Bacuna and Dembele brought a little bit of spark to Blues in the first sort of 5-10 minutes that they were on. I think that the plan was for Sunjic to man mark Connor Chaplin, potentially. I think Mark Venus mentioned that afterwards. But they just got played around. He got played around, didn't he? You know, if Hutchinson would come inside, and Ross Broadhead was there as well, and obviously Chaplin's good at finding space. Just got played around. So I don't know that the Blues midfield was ever massively to grips or had huge amount of control on the game. But you know, whatever little control that they had, I felt that did go. You know, once Ipswich figured out what Blues were trying to do to them.
Pink Panther. I started the day thinking it's Ipswich, it'll be a tough game. Probably can't judge too harshly if we lose, etc. Then Millwall produce Coop and Buster and wins for QPR, Sheffield Wednesday, Huddersfield and others. Getting nervous a tad, and that Millwall game looks massive. That Millwall game does look huge, doesn't it now, Brian? Blues away at Millwall. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I'm not going to rule out Blues picking something up from the next two games. I could see them quite easily get a point from one of these two games, and you know, 1 from 6 is not a good return, and that's not enough. But I've not written those off yet. I mean, it just obviously it depends what everyone else does as well. The phrase that leapt out for me there was tad nervous. I think that probably sums up where I am a little bit. I'm not, you know, excuse me, there's been times in the last 10 years when I've been more than a tad nervous. There's been times when I've been absolutely fraught, you know, that Blues would go down. I'm not there now, but I'm much less calm or about it than I was 4 days ago, I've got to say.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page there, Brian. Monster Mowbray.
What a take this is.
This is a belter. I'm going to enjoy reading this. To Brian, I'm glad you're not the one handing out new contracts at the club. Really don't see how Etheridge justifies a new contract, even as a number 2. Get someone in who can actually play with the ball at their feet. Go on, Brian.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the one handing out the contracts as well, and I'm sure everyone else is. So I think we agree on that. What at the risk of covering old ground, I just sense that I wouldn't be massively in favour of keeping Ruddy as a number 2 personally. I think if you're picking the potential better of the two goalkeepers in terms of, you know, being your number 2 and coming on in an emergency, I potentially would go Etheridge. All I've done there is restate my opinion. I haven't really explained it, have I? Just Etheridge is a bit younger. Okay. Listen, he's not great with his feet. I get that, and he wouldn't be the number 1. And potentially, you know, you don't ever really want to play your number 2 goalkeeper, do you? Yeah, I mean, I can take that on the chin. I think that's fair enough. Yeah, maybe Etheridge isn't the ideal number 2. I'm not sure Ruddy's the ideal number 2 either, which maybe leads me back to being talked around into getting rid of both of them. Yeah,
I think that's definitely a possibility as well. And a complete revamp with a different style of goalkeeper. On to questions. Lester Pyatt is first. Are we getting to a situation that when Bielik is fit, Sanderson makes way? In our current situation, we can't wait for him to get up to speed. That's the one I was touching on earlier when we were discussing this. I don't think Sanderson played badly actually against Ipswich. You could obviously see that he'd been a month without football, and there was a tad little bit of rustiness there. I never really like Sanderson as much when he plays on the left-hand side either. I prefer him when he's on the right. I think he always looks more comfortable there. and he obviously had to play on the left with Mark Roberts on the right. At the moment, my own opinion is that if Bielik is fit for Southampton, which Mark Venus suggested there's a good chance, I would stick with the partnership of Bielik and Mark Roberts. I think Mark Roberts has actually done really well in the last few games defensively. I think he did very well against Ipswich in the first half to help keep the score down. There was a really good tackle right in front of Kiefer Moore that was effectively goal saving because he was there waiting to tap in the 5th or 6th minute that Mark Roberts made. So, yeah, at the moment, Mark Roberts and Bielik. Long term, I think it should be Sanderson and Bielik. Sanderson's got a higher ceiling than Mark Roberts, in my opinion. I think he's shown at various points this season that he's a very, very good defender at this level. And I think the partnership with Bielik was showing signs of promise before injury broke it up.
I've been sitting here thinking about which two of the three I'd go for, and I keep changing my mind. That's bizarrely the one I would say Roberts would be the one, and it would be picking the other one for me. And I know I'm getting a bit of a reputation as an arch defender of the Mark Roberts Protection Society, but I thought he had a good game on Saturday, and everyone's going to point at the flick on that Kiefer Moore got for the third goal. But that, to me, it's the curse of the centre back, isn't it? You can defend like a hero for 89 minutes, lose one duel, and therefore a goal, and it looks like you've had a bad game. I don't think Roberts had a bad game. I thought Roberts stood up to Kiefer Moore pretty well, and Kiefer Moore's an awkward customer because he's built like an outhouse, but he drops off into space just in front of the back four, and then goes to ground whenever you're near him. So I think Roberts dealt with him quite well, I have to say, and until that one flick on. But then there was absolutely no cover, was there? For that third goal. Yes, Moore got the flick on, but I'm not sure what Blues were doing with the right back position by that stage, to be honest with you. And was it Hutchinson ran through and scored the third? Yeah. So Roberts, yes, for me. It's a flip of a coin between Bielik and Sanderson for me. I think potentially I would go Sanderson because of the captaincy thing. I think just about. I'm not massively sold on Bielik as an out and out defender. I think we've seen him get beaten at the front post for goals, haven't we? In the time that he's been here as well. Then so you gain a little bit potentially in defence with Sanderson and lose a little bit without Bielik. So pick your poison. I'll say mine's Sanderson and Roberts for now.
There's a mistake in Bielik, isn't there, to be fair, when he's at the back. I think we saw that against Sunderland, where just before half-time, there was almost second goal, I think, through Mundle, when he got in. Bielik took a loose touch and he got in behind and outwitted him in the box and really made a good save. So
he does tend to let it bounce a lot, or too much, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Bielik as well.
Yeah, whereas Roberts and Sanderson do just tap the ball, don't they? I think the benefits of Bielik being at the back is obvious in that he's better at playing out. He sees those passes through into midfield better than the centre-backs Blues have see them. So I think that if he's fit, I do think he'll come back into the starting 11. And I think because of Sanderson's lack of game time, I think it'll be at his expense.
Yeah, fair.
Next one from John Ramsey, and this is particularly pertinent because we were speaking about this last week, Brian. What do you know about Ashley Cole's involvement with coaching? It seems more involved now Rooney has gone. I think that's fair to say, isn't it? He has been far more involved since Wayne Rooney left the building, and obviously Carl Robinson also went and John O'Shea went as well. There's only Ashley Cole and Pete Shuttleworth remaining at Blues from Wayne Rooney's appointed coaching staff. And Cole, from what I'm told, has been very involved in the grass. He's been almost empowered by Tony Mowbray and Mark Venus to take on more responsibility that he didn't have under Wayne Rooney. I remember when I went to go and see that session that Wayne Rooney put on, Ashley Cole did 10 minutes of set piece coaching at the end. Very limited involvement. And obviously we know he's a coach that's got a fair bit of experience now as a number 2 in the Premier League and also with with England 21s working under Lee Carsley. So he's obviously someone in the development phase. But yeah, from what I'm told, he's now far more involved than he was when Wayne Rooney was in charge.
Yeah, I was watching the warm-up on Saturday at Ipswich, and it was Ashley Cole that was in the middle of the outfield players, the 10 outfield players, giving quite a rousing sort of, not a pre-game speech or anything like that, but, just trying to increase the intensity and get into the place. He was quite animated, actually, and that's the first time I've seen Ashley Cole really on the front foot and taking that lead. And as I think the word you use there is a good one. Mowbray's come in and empowered Cole. And I think when we asked Mowbray about who he was going to bring in for his backroom team right at the very outset, his default position was, well, let's see what we've got. Let's see if we can develop some coaches as well as some footballers. And that's Ashley Cole certainly seems to be getting that opportunity.
Liam Pearce, what do you think the main reason why Buchanan isn't playing at the moment is?
Quite straightforward, this, isn't it?
Yeah, go on, Brian, because I think Buchanan explained this himself to you.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. After the Leicester FA Cup tie, Blues put Buchanan up for interview, and I asked him what the manager had said to him, and he said, "Play forward more," and it was literally that simple. So yeah, we could spend the next 5 minutes talking about why Lee Buchanan isn't playing, but I think that is basically the answer. He wants the adventure of Ethan Laird on the pitch, and is Drame better than Buchanan going forward? He probably is as well, isn't he? He's got 5 assists, hasn't he? So I suspect that I think those are all the stats, and that's all the information we need to know, unless you can shed any more light on it.
No, that's bang on. I think the only thing I will say as well is, in that first game that Mowbray had against Sunderland, we noticed how much he was getting onto Christian Bielik, because every time he got the ball, it was caught under his feet, and he was taking seconds to work out what he was going to do with it before eventually passing sideways. And Mowbray didn't want that. He wants players to go forward. And I think not to the same extent, but he was similar in his reaction to when Lee Buchanan was getting the ball in those first 2 or 3 games, in that he wanted him to go forward, and Buchanan was often taking the easy option and going backwards. And that's just something that's been instilled in him over a period of time. Let's be honest, he's a more defensively minded left back than an attacking one. I think he'll eventually get back in the team. I think he'll eventually get it because he's a good player. We've seen that this season, but it's just going to be a case of time for him, I think. Yeah, that's it. Last question from Top of the Cop 1875. Do you think we are currently getting the best out of Jordan James? Is Tyler Roberts doing enough to keep his place? And when do you think we'll see Pritchard? I said last question, you got 3 there, Brian. Do you want to take the Jordan James one first?
Thanks. I guess this comes down to what do you want from your midfielders? Do you want 8 goals, or do you want them to be heavily involved all the time?
Yeah.
JJ is impacting games with his goals, isn't he? He scored an equaliser against Swansea. He scored. Was it Blackburn he scored against as well? Yeah, he did.
No. Swansea, Sunderland. Yeah.
So he's contributing with goals. The point of the question is he's playing wide-ish on the left, isn't he? And is that the best use of Jordan James's skills? I mean, is it the best? No, he's a ball carrying, sort of strong running midfielder, isn't he? That's going to take the ball upfield, carry the ball upfield, just because of his physicality and his the pace with which he can run with the ball. He gets into good positions in the penalty box, and his finishing is really quite good. If you want your left-sided, I think you want that in the team, and you may want your left-sided sort of the 3 to be more a winger Dembele type. Do you then? So if you want Jordan James in the team, are you then playing him as a 10? In which case you're potentially displacing Stansfield or Roberts, which we'll come on to. Or are you playing him as a 6 in a double pivot? And then I ask you the question, are we getting the best out of JJ in the double pivot? No, I agree with the tone of the question, or the sentiment of the question is that it feels like there's more to come from JJ, and where does he fit in? And I think John Eustace had this issue, didn't he? Really, and where does he fit into this setup?
This system as well, which Blues play under Eustace and now play under Mowbray, it doesn't really suit him, does it? You know, I would love to see JJ in a 4-3-3 as one of the outside number 8s. I think that'd be his best position, because he's got a physicality to him that not many central midfield players have, in that he can carry the ball through midfield by himself rather than play through with a pass. That's where I personally think he'll develop long term and become a number 8. Tony Mowbray doesn't have to play that system to suit one player. JJ can play 4 or 5 roles in this system, and he does them quite well. I don't think we're seeing the best of him in terms of performance levels at the moment. I think he's doing okay, but I don't think we're seeing like brilliant games like we have at points this season. Like I think back to Cardiff away, he was absolutely superb that night, almost unplayable. I don't think we're seeing that level of performance, but we are seeing goals. And, you know, he's supplying them more regularly than any Blues player has over the last 4 months, you know, even more regularly than Stansfield as well. You know, this season, JJ's got 8 goals and they've all come pretty much since October. So,
and not that many starts either.
No, 17 starts in the league. So yeah.
Are the goals maybe just papering over some cracks in performance levels? Maybe are the performance levels due to him not being used in his optimal position? Probably yes.
Yeah. Going on to the second part of that question, with Pritchard, Mark Venus told me last week that he will train this week, so he should really be in contention for a place on the bench against Southampton, I think. But we'll get again later update at the press conference on Thursday. Tyler Roberts, is he doing enough to keep his place? I thought he played really well against Blackburn and Sunderland. Without the goal, if Tyler Roberts had scored one of those 2 chances in the Blackburn game, I think we'd have been, you know, looking at that and saying that's an 8 out of 10 performance. He's done really well there. Against Sunderland, I thought he was really effective. He played a key role in the equalising goal. It was his persistence that created the chance and the opening in the 6-yard box for Jordan James. He just wasn't involved against Ipswich, was he? I think Ipswich are always going to have more possession, and they completely dominated the first half. And Roberts was on the fringe of the game. It wasn't really a game for him on reflection, was it? Blues probably may have been better suited having another midfield player in there, make them a little bit more combative and solid. Maybe Jordan James could have played 10 and Bakuna could have played wide left. It didn't work for Roberts, but I would I be surprised to see him start against Southampton? No, because he's played well in his last 3 games, really, on the whole, anyway.
Yeah, I don't think any of those sort of that forward 4 played brilliantly well against Ipswich, to be honest with you. The game sort of passed them all by, didn't it? So I wouldn't necessarily put... Tyler Roberts wasn't massively effective, but neither was Jay Stansfield particularly, or JJ, other than the goal. Miyoshi was probably the one that you know, did leave some sort of impact. I thought Miyoshi had a good game. I don't think Roberts will play 90 minutes against Southampton and Millwall. You know, I think you know, potentially there'll be some rotation there, because you'd be mindful of his workload. I suppose if you take him out, you bring Bakuna back into the team. You can't really argue against that, can you? Yeah, it's not a massive issue, but it's something that would be looked at in the coming days, I would say.
Yeah, just quickly before we finished, if you've asked me a month ago, Brian, whether I'd give Blues a prayer against Southampton, I'd have said no, because they're on a 26-game unbeaten run, I think, at one point. But they have lost 3 of the last 4. So are you giving Blues a chance in this game of the weekend?
Yeah, but I am. Yeah, I think. You know, I think if the press is right, I think they can win the ball in very dangerous positions, and then it's and then it's a case of, you know, getting that goal, and the game script becomes very different when you're 1-0 up. And we saw St Andrews come to life, didn't we? In the last home game, I'm not sure it will be as packed this time. Certainly, there's been no sort of tub thumping Tom Wagner call to arms. But if they can get the safe standing area as full as possible again and create that vibe behind the goal, and the fans can give the players energy on the press, then I can see Blues getting something. Yeah, obviously, they'll have to keep it's about keeping the door closed at the other end, which will be difficult because there's a couple of Southampton players that have gotten absolutely no business being in the Championship.
More than a couple. I genuinely, I can see Blues getting a result against Southampton, because I think we saw in the first game against Southampton this season, when they were just starting that crazy run of form, that Blues created chances, even though the structure of the team wasn't right at that point. Let's be honest. I think Blues can get something. I think they're going to have to settle for far less possession than they would want, than they have had in games under Tony Mowbray. I think you're probably going to be looking at the 25-30% mark possession, because Southampton, as we said under Russell Martin, will pass you to death. But it's about making sure they're not passing the ball around in dangerous areas, and making sure that when they're passing it around at the back, the press is right and Blues can win the ball back in Southampton's final third, or defensive third even. But I am giving them a chance. I'm not going to sit here and predict a scoreline that says Blues win, because it'll inevitably come back to that. But I do think Blues have got a chance of getting something in this game. And I also think they've got a chance of getting something against Hull, because we've already seen Blues outplay Hull recently. I know it's a very different team, but there's weaknesses in that Hull defence, even though they are very strong going forward. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom, but we do need to see Blues start picking up points pretty swiftly, so that they can, get out of this position again that they've found themselves in. Yeah.
Just while you were talking there, just checking some stats. Southampton have conceded 10 in their last 5 games. So I do absolutely give them a hope.
Yeah, perfect. That's a positive note to finish on, Brian. Thanks everyone for tuning again this week. As always, we appreciate your takes and questions as well, and hopefully we'll be reacting to a Birmingham City victory against Southampton this time next week. Thanks, and a big keep right on from both of us.